Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. I'm absolutely thrilled you're here today. We're tackling a topic that is literally everywhere right now, dominating headlines and boardrooms alike. We are going to demystify generative AI. And my promise to you today is a completely hype-free, structured, and crystal clear breakdown of what generative AI actually is, and exactly how it works under the hood. No science fiction, just the fascinating facts.
Right off the bat, let's tackle the elephant in the room. The biggest question people have when they first start playing around with these tools. Is this thing actually alive? Look, it's incredibly easy to be fooled when a machine talks back to you sounding exactly like a human. But let's bust that myth right out of the gate. Generative AI models are not alive. They can't think for themselves. While their outputs are so incredibly good that they can trick us into sensing a living mind, fundamentally, these systems are highly advanced statistical engines. They're predicting patterns, not pondering their own existence.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our agenda for today. First, we'll meet generative AI. Second, we'll compare discriminative versus generative models. Third, we'll look under the hood at LLMs. Fourth, we'll cover the history of generation. And finally, impact, limits, and future. Section 1. Meet generative AI, the big picture. So here's your core definition. Generative AI describes algorithms that are designed to create entirely new content. And that word new is absolutely crucial here. Whether it's writing an essay, generating photorealistic images, composing audio, rendering video, or even writing executable software code, these systems do it by studying massive amounts of example information, which we call training data. By learning the underlying statistical distributions and relationships within that data, they can generate fresh, original outputs that share the characteristics of the training data, but without just copy-pasting it.
Think about when you use a famous tool like ChatGPT. It simulates a human-like conversation, right? But it isn't reasoning the way you or I do. It's actually just predicting the next best word or sequence of words based on the astronomical amount of textual patterns it studied during its training. It knows what a typical response is supposed to look like, and it mathematically generates a similar, yet entirely unique output right there on the fly.
Let's move to Section 2, discriminative versus generative models, the paradigm shift. For decades, traditional artificial intelligence, specifically machine learning, was extremely useful, but it was largely limited to predictive or analytical tasks. It was used to observe, classify, and categorize stuff. Well, we're now moving away from an era of merely analyzing what already exists to a totally new era of synthesizing entirely novel creations from scratch. It's a real game changer. So the crucial point here is how these two different AI systems frame a problem. A traditional discriminative model asks, which class does this belong to? You give it an email and it categorizes it as spam or not spam. Pretty straightforward. But a generative model asks a totally different question. It asks, how can I generate something like this? It wants to understand the underlying rules of the data so incredibly well that it can build a brand new example from the ground up. To make this super concrete, let's look at a classic example. If you feed thousands of photos of adorable cats into a traditional discriminative model, its only job is to look at a new photo and tell you, yep, that's a cat, or nope, that's a dog. It perceives and classifies. But generative AI, you just type in, show me a photo of a cat, and it creates a brand new photorealistic image of a cat that has literally never existed in the real world. That is the fundamental breakthrough.
Section 3. Under the hood, LLMs, simplifying the engine.
The engine powering tools like ChatGPT is called a large language model, or LLM. These models rely on a specific architecture introduced back in 2017 called the transformer. Now, the real secret sauce of the transformer is something called a self-attention mechanism. It allows the AI to process sequential data like an entire paragraph of text all at once and deeply understand the relationships and context between really distant words. It doesn't just read word by word, it grasps the entire big picture of the sentence. Building these massive models basically happens in two main steps. First up is pre-training. Here, the model is exposed to hundreds of billions of text tokens from all across the internet. It learns grammar, facts, reasoning abilities, and language structure just by analyzing statistical patterns. Then comes step 2, which is fine-tuning. A raw, pre-trained model is kind of chaotic, so researchers use human feedback to align the model, teaching it to be helpful, safe, and conversational. Let's tie those concepts back to the everyday tools you hear about all the time. You've definitely heard the acronym GPT endlessly, but what does it actually mean? It stands for Generative pre-trained transformer. Generative because it creates new content. Pre-trained because it went through that massive data gathering phase. And transformer for the neural network architecture that makes the whole shebang possible. It's really that simple.
Section 4. The history of generation. How we got here. You know, the recent AI boom feels like it happened overnight, but it's actually the result of over 70 years of painstaking groundwork.
Way back in 1950, Alan Turing proposed the Turing test to measure machine intelligence. In 1966, an MIT researcher created ELIZA, an early chatbot that used simple pattern matching to parody a psychotherapist. Fast forward to 2014, and a huge breakthrough happened with generative adversarial networks, or GANs, which pitted two neural networks against each other to create stunningly realistic images. Then came the transformer architecture in 2017, and finally, the explosive launch of ChatGPT in late 2022, which brought it all straight into the mainstream.
Now, what's really wild is the sheer scale and speed of what happened next. When ChatGPT launched, it reached 100 million users in just 2 months. It became the fastest-growing consumer application in human history. The technology had finally matured enough, and the interface was simple enough, you're just typing in a chat box, that anyone could leverage advanced computational power without needing to know a single line of code.
Section 5. Impact, limits, and future, the real-world reality. Let's start with the incredible promise of this tech. $4.4 trillion. That is a staggering projection from McKinsey regarding the annual global economic value that generative AI applications stand to add across industries. We're talking about a fundamental shift in workplace productivity, potentially increasing worker output significantly by automating and augmenting complex cognitive tasks.
And this isn't just some abstract future. It's happening right now. In healthcare, AI is increasing the efficiency of medical documentation while maintaining strict accuracy. In software development, programming assistants are automatically writing substantial portions of functional code. We're seeing personalized AI tutors in education, automated design optimization in manufacturing, and instantaneous content creation in entertainment and marketing. It's totally transforming how knowledge work is done across the board.
But, and this is a massive but, we have to understand the limits. The biggest one by far is the hallucination problem. Remember what we established earlier. These models are statistical predictors. They're not true thinkers. Because of this, they can generate information that sounds incredibly plausible, confident, and articulate, but is just entirely factually incorrect. For safety-critical fields like medical diagnosis or legal advice, this lack of genuine real-world understanding is a major hurdle.
Still, while these outputs can sometimes be flawed, they can also be amazingly creative and slightly surreal. I absolutely love this quote highlighting a famous early output of generative AI. A user prompted a model, and it produced a perfectly structured passage describing how to remove a peanut butter sandwich from a VCR, written entirely in the archaic, majestic style of the King James Bible. It perfectly encapsulates the uncanny, flexible, and honestly astonishing capabilities of these systems.
Which brings us to the future. We're moving from simple chatbots toward agentic AI. Systems that can actually take autonomous actions, reason through complex problems, and act as dedicated digital assistants. As this scales in 2026 and beyond, the most important question we face is this: how will we collaborate